What if I told you a billionaire had to disguise himself as a gardener just to save his own child? Would you believe it? In the heart of an upscale Atlanta neighborhood, the sharp cry of a little girl shattered the quiet morning. Behind the glass window, a blonde woman in a white silk dress slapped a 6-year-old across the face just because she spilled her milk. Bad girls don't get breakfast. Do you understand? Outside, the gardener froze. His rough, calloused hands gripped the shears so tightly that blood began to show. No one knew. That man was Marcus Ellington, the owner of the mansion. A father forced to hide his true identity inside his own home, investigating his new wife, the woman he suspected of hurting his daughter every single day. And he didn't know. There was someone else in that house. Leah, the black housemaid, willing to risk her job and everything she had just to speak the truth. What she was about to do would leave everyone speechless. Before we begin, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And I'm genuinely curious. Have you or your family ever faced a situation like this? Share your thoughts and what it means to you in the comments. I'd love to see how far the message and meaning of our stories can reach. In the heart of Atlanta's luxurious mansion district, sunlight gleamed off glass windows that sparkled like diamonds. But inside those walls, a storm was brewing. Marcus Ellington, the billionaire once featured on the cover of Forbes, now stood frozen like a statue, dressed in a worn gardener's uniform, his hands stained with the scent of soil. Through the glass, he saw Victoria, his new wife, slap their little daughter across the face for spilling a cup of milk. How many times have I told you? Filthy little hands like yours ruin my table. Little Amelia burst into tears, her tiny hands clutching her cheek, while 2-year-old Isaac trembled behind a chair. Outside, Marcus gripped the handle of his shears until his palms bled. The man who once had the power to buy an entire city now stood powerless before his child's cries. He couldn't step inside. He couldn't shout, because to everyone in that house he was just Robert, the newly hired gardener. For 2 weeks he had lived in hiding inside his own home, quietly gathering proof of a truth no one dared to speak. Every morning, he woke up to the smell of damp earth, silently watching through the kitchen curtain. And every night, he heard the sound of Victoria's footsteps, the slam of a door, and Amelia's muffled sobs behind her bedroom wall. But what tore him apart the most wasn't the bruises on his daughter's hands. It was the fear in her eyes every time she looked at her mother. Marcus knew he couldn't stay silent forever, but if he acted too soon, he'd lose his one chance to expose the truth. So he waited and endured. Amid the blooming roses outside, a question echoed in his mind. How many fathers in this world have to disguise themselves just to save their own children? And he had no idea. Inside that cold, echoing mansion, there was still someone else. Leah, the black housemaid, the woman who would change everything. That night, after Amelia's cries faded behind the closed door, Marcus remained in the garden. The cold night wind brushed past the rose bushes he once planted with his own hands, now carrying only the metallic scent of blood seeping from his palms. He looked up at the brightly lit mansion, his chest hollow with shame and disbelief. How long have I let my child live with someone like her? The question kept echoing in his mind. 3 weeks earlier, inside the 42nd floor office of Ellington Group, everything was as flawless as his life used to be. Behind the glass wall overlooking the glowing city of Atlanta, Marcus sat still, gripping a cup of cold coffee. Across from him was Daniel, his longtime friend and lawyer of 10 years. "Daniel?" Marcus began, his voice low. "Amelia gets terrified every time Victoria walks into the room. She flinches when I touch her. And Isaac, he's silent, like a shadow." Daniel frowned. "Maybe you're overthinking this. Victoria's always been attentive. Marcus cut him off. I used to think so too. But last week, Amelia said something that's been haunting me ever since. When Daddy's gone, Mommy changes. It was no longer a vague fear. It was a father's intuition, the kind that never lies. Daniel suggested hiring a private investigator, but Marcus shook his head, eyes hardening. I don't need strangers. I need the truth, through my own eyes. Daniel sighed, giving him a look caught between worry and disbelief. Marcus, you're a billionaire, not an actor. What are you going to do? Pretend to be the gardener? Marcus's voice dropped, rough but steady. Yes, I'll become the one person she'll never notice. Silence filled the room. The ticking of the clock sounded like a countdown. A decision had been made, not just a reckless act, but a declaration of war. And so, inside a mansion glowing with light but starved of love, a powerful father chose to become invisible, to witness the truth the glittering world around him refused to see. He didn't yet know that this journey would uncover more than a crime. It would force him to confront the darkest corners of his own soul. After that fateful night, Marcus vanished from the world of power. No more tailored suits. No more luxury cars or secretaries waiting outside his boardroom door. In their place, he wore a coarse cotton shirt, a faded hat, and worn-out shoes stained with dirt. Marcus Ellington no longer existed. Only Robert, the newly hired gardener at Ellington Hall. That morning, as he walked through the familiar iron gates, everything felt strangely distant. The place that was once his home had now become a stage of secrets. Victoria's heels clicked sharply against the marble floor, cold and precise, like the sound of judgment. Before she could speak, a gentle voice came from the kitchen. Good morning, Robert. You must be new here. I'm Leah, the one who keeps this house from losing its last bit of humanity. The black woman stood before him in a simple uniform, a cloth still in her hand. Her gaze didn't flinch like the others. It held no fear, only depth, sadness, and a trace of compassion, long tested by pain. Marcus nodded quietly, but something in his chest tightened. Her tone was soft, yet every word carried the weight of old wounds. She was the only person in that house who spoke to him with dignity, even though he was just the help. In that moment, Marcus realized Leah was different. In her dark brown eyes lived a story of a woman once judged for her skin color, who still chose kindness over resentment. When Victoria entered, the air shifted instantly. Her presence drained the warmth from the room. Don't dirty the floor, she snapped. Men like you should learn to stay silent and keep your head down. Marcus bowed low, but in Leah's eyes, he saw something else. Understanding, as if she knew this man was not who he seemed. And in that silent moment, between Victoria's icy disdain and Leah's quiet grace, an invisible war began. Between power and compassion, between deception and the small flickering light of humanity still left inside that house. From the first day Marcus met Leah, he realized that inside this mansion, there were only two kinds of people: those who command and those who endure. And somewhere between those lines, Leah existed. Quiet, steadfast, like a soft note in a symphony ruled by power and deceit. In the early days, Marcus kept his distance. He trimmed the roses, watered the lawns, pretending not to hear the arguments echoing through the walls. But as the days passed, Victoria's voice grew sharper. The same voice that once sounded sweet and refined had turned into a whip, striking against the silence of the house. He saw her screaming at Amelia. Call me Madame. An ungrateful little brat like you doesn't deserve to call me mother. The 6-year-old trembled and whispered, Yes, madam. The word shattered in the air, falling to the floor like a drop of cold glass. Marcus couldn't believe that the woman who once vowed to love his children as her own could be this cruel. Every time Victoria skipped Amelia's breakfast or tossed Isaac's teddy bear into the fire, Marcus could only watch through the window, his fists clenched until they bled. Meanwhile, Leah, The black woman Victoria looked down upon was the only one brave enough to break the silence. She would hide a small piece of bread in her cloth and gently feed it to Amelia after meals. She wiped their tears, humming a haunting lullaby once sung by her ancestors. "Hush now, little one. The sun will find you again." That night, Marcus stood on the porch, listening to her voice drift through the open window. He saw the soft glow from the children's room, Leah sitting beside them, bathed in warm yellow light. And something inside him ached. She's doing what their own father, cannot. And with that realization came another truth. In this house drowned in darkness, the only light came from the one society chose to see as lesser. From that moment on, Marcus knew, if he wanted to save his children, he could no longer stand by and watch. He would have to step into the darkness and face it himself. Since that night, Marcus no longer heard Leah's voice singing through the halls. She moved more quietly now, her steps softer, her eyes cautious whenever Victoria was near. He knew then Leah had been warned. To a woman like Victoria, kindness was a crime. One late afternoon, sunlight slanted across the rose bushes he was trimming. The smell of damp soil mixed with the sting of blood. The thorns had sliced deep into his skin. When he looked up, Leah was walking toward him, a glass of cold water in her hand. "Robert, I thought you might need this," she said softly, but with a steady tone. Marcus gave a faint smile, accepting it. They sat beneath the old oak tree, sunlight falling in broken patterns through the leaves. For a long while, neither spoke. Then Leah said something that stopped him cold. "You know, sometimes children aren't believed until it's too late." Marcus set the glass down, his gaze fixed on her. "You've seen that happen?" Leah nodded slowly. Her eyes drifted toward a faraway place, a memory that had never fully healed. "When I was little, I used to get beaten too," she said quietly. "But no one ever believed a black girl. They said I was exaggerating, that black folks always make things dramatic. So I learned to stay silent. Then my little brother died. From an illness no one treated because my mother didn't have insurance. That's when I understood. In this country, sometimes the color of your skin decides who gets believed and who doesn't." Her words hung in the air, heavy as stone. Marcus's eyes burned. He realized then her pain and his were shaped differently, but born from the same color, the color of helplessness. In that quiet moment, between a father in disguise and a black woman scarred by a lifetime of injustice, something invisible connected them, not through words, but through the silent understanding of two souls who knew what it meant to be unheard. And from that day on, Marcus knew one thing for certain. If there was anyone he could trust in this house, it was Leah. From that day on, after their quiet conversation, it was as if an invisible thread had reconnected Marcus and Leah. They didn't speak much, but every glance, every small gesture carried a silent understanding. Leah began spending more time with the children, helping Amelia read, spoon-feeding little Isaac with gentle patience, teaching them soft Southern songs, sung in her deep, soulful voice. But from that moment, Victoria began to notice. One afternoon, as sunlight poured through the thin curtain, Victoria stood in the kitchen, arms crossed, her gaze sharp as a blade. "You always take their side. Who do you think you are?" Leah looked up, her voice calm, but her eyes steady. "Someone who knows what fear feels like, ma'am." That sentence was the spark. Victoria's hand struck across Leah's face with a harsh, echoing slap that filled the tiled kitchen. The plate in Leah's hand fell and shattered into pieces. From the garden, Marcus heard everything. The sound burned through him like fire, but he had to hold it in. If he stepped inside, everything he had planned would collapse. Leah bent down to pick up the shards. Blood dripped from her fingertip onto the white floor, bright red and cold. Behind the doorway, Amelia stood frozen, her wide eyes brimming with tears. Leah noticed her and smiled softly, reassuringly. "It's all right, sweetheart. I'm okay." That moment, the smile of a black woman standing in the middle of humiliation, made Marcus's chest tighten. He, a powerful man, had to pretend not to see, while she, small and powerless, with skin the world refused to respect, stood there bearing every wound to protect children who weren't even her own. That night, Marcus quietly placed a tiny recorder beneath the dining table. If Victoria could hide her cruelty behind a smile, he would expose it with the truth. And in the silence of that night, as Leah wiped the bloodstain from the floor, Marcus realized the battle inside that house was no longer between a husband and a wife, but between power and humanity, between the oppressor and those the world had chosen to overlook. Since the day she was slapped, Leah had become little more than a shadow in that house. She worked quietly, no arguing, no reacting, just lowering her head and obeying orders. But Marcus knew that wasn't fear. It was patience. Like him, Leah was enduring, waiting for the right moment to expose the darkness. Many nights, Marcus would glance through the window and see her sitting alone in the laundry room, her hands still wet with soap, eyes staring out into the night. Moonlight fell across her face, tired but unbroken. Maybe that was why he began to trust her more than anyone else. Then one morning, while cleaning Victoria's wardrobe, Leah accidentally found an old envelope wedged between a few leather journals. Inside was a life insurance document. Her brows furrowed. The primary beneficiary was Victoria Whitmore, and the insured person, Marcus Ellington. Leah froze. That name, she had heard it before. The previous owner of the mansion. People said he'd been away on an extended business trip. But if that were true, why was the policy still active? And why would Victoria hide it so carefully? Leah's heart pounded. She didn't want to believe what she was thinking, yet a cold realization crept down her spine. Victoria had once planned a murder, a crime buried beneath layers of wealth and glamour. That afternoon, while Robert was trimming the hedges, Leah approached quietly, handing him a folded paper. "You need to see this," she whispered. "I'm not sure what it means, but something's wrong." Marcus unfolded it, and when his eyes met his own name on the page, his heart nearly stopped. She had no idea the man standing before her was the very name on that document. From that moment, they began to plan together, recording conversations, collecting evidence, waiting for the moment to expose everything. But Victoria wasn't a fool. Her suspicion grew sharper each day. And Marcus knew, if anything went wrong, Leah would be the one to take the fall. A few days later, while Marcus was in the garden, he heard Victoria's furious voice from inside the house. "Did you steal from me?" Leah stood frozen, her eyes wide with confusion. Victoria held up a diamond bracelet, the very one she had hidden herself. "I'm calling the police. A black thief like you doesn't deserve to live in this house." Marcus's grip tightened around the garden shears. He knew Victoria's game had begun, but this time she didn't know that the gardener she despised was the very man holding the secret that could destroy her. Since the theft accusation, Victoria kept Leah under strict watch. She doubled her chores, cut her meals, and forbade her from going near the children, unless Madam allowed it. And Marcus, still wearing the mask of Robert, knew one thing: one wrong move, and Leah would pay the price for them both. Every night, he still heard Amelia's muffled sobs through the thick walls, Victoria's voice, sharp, venomous, Leah's trembling lullabies, trying to quiet the storm. The mansion that once echoed with power now pulsed only with fear. Marcus knew it had to end. The recordings, the documents, everything he needed was ready. Now, it was time for truth to walk into the light. That afternoon, Victoria hosted a ladies' luncheon in the garden, a parade of silk dresses, laughter polished to perfection, and the faint scent of lavender hanging in the air. Amelia and Isaac stood beside her, dressed neatly but with eyes that had forgotten how to shine. Victoria smiled, lifting her glass for all to hear. Aren't they adorable? I care for them as if they were my own. Marcus, trimming roses nearby, clenched his hand until a thorn drew blood. He knew what was coming, and he was ready for it. Then, a crash of glass. Amelia's small hand trembled, knocking over a cup of water. All eyes turned. Victoria's smile vanished. She rose slowly, her voice cutting through the chatter like ice. Clumsy little thing. Didn't I teach you better? She raised her hand. But before the blow could fall, Leah stepped in front of the girl. The slap cracked through the air, hitting Leah across the face. Blood touched her lip. Silence. The kind that freezes everything. Victoria's voice broke through, twisted with fury. You're just a black maid, and you dare defy me? And then, from the garden's edge, a voice answered. Calm, steady, unmistakable. No, she's not the one who should be afraid anymore. Every head turned. Marcus walked forward, removing the straw hat, peeling away the false beard. His eyes, sharp, cold, unflinching. I'm not your gardener, Victoria, he said quietly. I'm the husband you thought was gone. The world stopped. The elegant women froze in disbelief. The man they'd seen pruning roses for weeks was Marcus Ellington, the owner of the mansion, the man Victoria claimed had gone away. Victoria's face turned ghostly white. Her lips quivered, and for the first time in her life, she was the one unmasked. The garden that once shimmered under sunlight now stood frozen in a chilling silence. No more polite laughter, no more clinking glasses, only stunned faces staring at the man walking slowly toward Victoria. Marcus removed his gardening gloves. His fingers, still streaked with dirt, carried the weight of weeks spent living as a ghost in his own home. Victoria backed away, voice trembling yet desperate to cling to her arrogance. Marcus, what are you doing? Have you lost your mind? He didn't answer. He simply looked at her, not with rage, but with the hollow ache of someone who once loved too deeply. Around them, whispers began to rise, the air thick with unease. Marcus reached into his pocket, pulled out a small recorder, and placed it on the table. I don't need to say a word, he said quietly. You already did. A click. Then her voice filled the air. Cold, venomous, unmistakable. Fear works better than love. His child will learn to fear me. The room broke into chaos. The women turned, eyes wide, mouths open in disbelief. Leah clutched Amelia's trembling hands as the little girl buried her face against her shoulder. Victoria lunged forward, trying to grab the recorder, but Marcus caught her wrist. His voice, low and unshakable, cut through the noise. You once told me I didn't know pain. Now I do, because I gave my heart to a monster. He reached into his coat, pulling out a folder. Copies of insurance papers, financial records, everything Leah had found. I'm filing for divorce, he said steadily. And these are going to the police. Minutes later, sirens echoed through the estate. Officers led Victoria away in handcuffs, her face twisted in fury and humiliation. Amelia began to cry. But this time, the tears weren't from fear. They were tears of release. Marcus knelt, gathering her into his arms. Behind him, Leah stood quietly, eyes glistening, the faintest smile breaking through her weariness. For the first time, the Ellington mansion was silent. Not from fear, but from justice. And in that silence, Marcus finally understood. Justice isn't always written in laws. Sometimes, it's written in the courage of those the world never thought would speak. That afternoon, when the police car disappeared beyond the line of trees, the Ellington estate fell into a strange, tender quiet. No more shouting, no more commanding footsteps, only the wind whispering through the open windows, and the faint scent of roses drifting through the halls. Marcus stood still, watching his two children play under the porch. Their laughter, hesitant, fragile, but pure, blurred his eyes. From behind him, Leah stepped out, a damp cloth in her hand, gently wiping the dried streak of blood from the marble floor, a remnant of the darkness that once ruled this house. and the final trace of a chapter now closing. A week later, Leah packed her few belongings into an old suitcase, a couple of worn dresses, a frayed Bible, and a small drawing Amelia had made for her. Marcus approached, voice low and trembling with emotion. "You don't have to go. I owe you more than I can ever repay. You saved my children, and you saved me from my own silence." Leah smiled, eyes glinting softly in the morning light. "I didn't save anyone, Marcus. I just did what I wish someone had done for me when I was a child." Her voice wavered, not from weakness, but from the quiet strength of someone who had survived her own storms. Amelia ran up, wrapping her small arms around Leah. "Miss Leah, can't you stay?" she whispered. Leah knelt, smoothing the girl's hair. She didn't answer, only smiled. A smile that was gentle, warm, and achingly full of goodbye. Final scene. Morning light. Marcus stood in the garden, where the roses he once tended in disguise now bloomed brighter than ever. Behind him came the soft snip of pruning shears. He turned. Leah stood there, wearing a simple gardener's outfit, her face calm and free. "You know," she said, trimming a vibrant red bloom, "sometimes, to make flowers grow again, you have to pull out the rotten roots first." Marcus looked at her, then up at the clear sky above. Sunlight poured through the leaves, bathing the garden, the same place where pain once hid, in quiet rebirth. And in that moment something became clear. Justice isn't only about punishing the wicked. It's about giving goodness the chance to bloom in the hearts of those the world once overlooked.